Check 1, 2. Test 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey, folks, if you have a spare seat next to you, everybody scoosh on in towards the middle. We got a lot of people standing. We can't even get everybody in. So if cuddle up with your neighbor. So,
Ready? Everyone, there's a little bit of room kind of in the center and up in the sides and up in the center up here. Don't be shy. If anyone wants to try to fit in as much as possible, we do want to try to get everyone in here. This is amazing. All right, with that, everyone, wow, what a community we have here. My name is Stephanie. I'm with the Placer County District Attorney's Office. As a mom, as a concerned resident myself, we are here with you. Having gone through this issue for the past 4 years of my life as well, I cannot tell you enough. You will not have more dedicated officials that will walk alongside you and give you information and fight with you than the ones standing up here today. With that, we have a couple elected officials in the crowd. We wanted to make sure we gave them an opportunity to introduce themselves. So if you're an elected official or an official, and if you could please raise your hand and introduce yourself, and we'll bring a mic over to you. Anyone elected?
Hi, I'm Sean Lohman, council member at the city of Colfax for the last 6 years.
My name is Caroline McCauley, and I am the new mayor of the city of Colfax. And while you, Sean was it before I was, but we're up here because while you are not directly within our city limits, you are a part of our community, and anything that impacts you guys is, of course, going to impact all of our neighbors. So that's why we're here.
Thank you. Great. Is there anyone we're missing? Okay, again, thank you. Wow, thank you so much for this turnout. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Placer County District Attorney Morgan Geyer.
Good evening. I'm sorry we have to meet under these circumstances, but this turnout is pretty awe-inspiring and reflects the power of a small community. So thank you all for giving up your time and testing your patience to talk about the issue tonight. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview as to how we got here, sort of what the process is as it relates to the sexually violent predator process. Many of you know all of these details. Some of you may just have heard about it, and I want everybody to sort of be on the same page. So indulge me just a bit, and I'm going to go through a couple of the legal sort of key events that got us here and really what we are facing right now as we go in to the hearing on February 13th. So all of this stems from the conduct of Mr. Stevenson back in 1990. In 1990, he assaulted several women in the South Lake Tahoe area. He was tried and convicted in El Dorado County in 1991 and was ultimately sentenced to 30 years in prison. Back in those days, much like it is today, when you served a prison sentence, you served about half of that, and he served 15 of those 30 years in the state prison. The way the law is written for sexually violent predators is it is designed for people who have finished serving their prison sentence, meaning they are due for either parole or release. And the law says if you have committed a number of listed sexual offenses, of which Mr. Stevenson's crimes qualify, if you have committed those and had been convicted, and you have a mental disorder, a diagnosed mental disorder from a psychiatrist or a psychologist that drives the commission of those crimes, you can then be taken from the prison commitment to the Department of State Hospitals and civilly committed for treatment, meaning after your prison sentence, you are then confined involuntarily into the Department of State Hospitals for purposes of treating that mental disorder so that you do not, when you are released, commit those kinds of crimes again. And that's what happened in Mr. Stevenson's case in 2006. He completed his prison sentence. He was then referred by the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to the Department of State Hospitals. They diagnosed him with a mental disorder that drove his sexual and criminal desires. And they committed him indefinitely to the Department of State Hospitals. Now, there are rules and procedures along with those. So when they diagnosed him, they then sent it to our office. We have to pose it to the court. It was a trial by a judge who determined that he did qualify and he was indeed committed to the Department of State Hospitals, where he remained for a number of years. The way the process works, you stay there until a doctor recommends that you be released based on what that doctor feels is a success in a treatment and is now worthy of a risk to conditionally release someone, meaning release them into the public with regulations, much like someone would be on probation or parole, but it's under the Department of State Hospitals that would do this sort of monitoring. So in 2014, the doctors sent a notice to the court saying, we believe Mr. Stevenson has been sufficiently rehabilitated and treated to where he is deserving of conditional release, meaning safe to be released with certain conditions. As many of you may have followed this case, in 2014, he was ultimately released to a residence in Roseville. And a lot of you probably have the question, if he committed his crimes in El Dorado County, why on earth are we dealing with him here in Placer County? And that is a good question. At some point along the process, it is determined legally what is the county of domicile, meaning where does this person fit legally based on his criminal behavior. And somewhere along the way, he had a residence in Roseville, and that was about the time that he had committed his crimes in El Dorado County. So legally, we were unable to contest that portion of this process, meaning we couldn't say, hey, this is El Dorado County's problem and not Placer's. It was legally determined to be Placer County. We have several of the others of these kinds of cases sort of in the hopper, and one of the first things we do is we determine whether or not we can challenge what we call domicile, or the county where that case will remain. And unfortunately, we are unable to do that here. I don't know the details or circumstances of his residence in Roseville at the time, but it was on his DMV printout and becomes essentially that issue. And by the time we got to this point, that issue was no longer able for us to try and litigate. So in 2014, he was released into the community in Roseville. In 2017, it was alleged that he had improperly violated the terms of his release by trying to access the internet and view inappropriate images online. That resulted in a court hearing where it was determined that he did indeed violate the terms of his release, and he was returned back to the Department of State Hospitals for further treatment. There was a period of time where he underwent treatment for the next couple of years until 2020, was it 2021, Tim, or 2022 when we first got the notice? 2021, we first were alerted once again by doctors who had been continuing to treat him that he was again, in their opinion, suitable for conditional release. We received that notice. We challenged that. That again resulted in a hearing or a trial, essentially, where we opposed his return, citing not only his crimes, the fact that he has already violated once, statistics within the Department of State Hospitals that show those who violate their terms are more likely to violate again. And based on all of those things, we were of the strong position that Mr. Stevenson belongs in continued confinement in the Department of State Hospitals to continue his treatment. We were unsuccessful. The judge denied our motion and sided with the Department of State Hospitals, who was lobbying for his release based on their criteria of treatment. Again, we disagreed and said Mr. Stevenson belongs inside that Department of State Hospitals, but the judge ordered his release in 2021, or in early 2022, he said, I am ordering that Mr. Stevenson be released. That triggered the search by the Department of State Hospitals and their healthcare provider, their subcontractor, Liberty Healthcare, to begin the search around Placer County. They were limited to Placer County because that's what the law says, and they go about a search in a way that we really don't know how they do it. But every now and then they would come up with addresses. And many of you who followed this case in the news had heard about an address in Amador County and then another one out in the Sheridan area. And I'll go through each of those briefly. But essentially, it is the obligation of the Department of State Hospitals and Liberty Healthcare to find an appropriate location, one that meets the statutory minimums, meaning it can't be prohibited. It can't be near a school or near a park. Some of those basic things that make a house completely off limits if they are too close. So we were alerted that they had not been able to find any residences for a period of time, that they just simply weren't able to do so. And at the time, we were able to then file a motion with the court saying we have heard that the Department of State Hospitals has exhausted their search within Placer County. And therefore, we were able to say this represents what's legally called extraordinary circumstances to go beyond the borders of Placer County. I am the district attorney for Placer County. I do not want to thrust these sexually violent predators into any community, but it's my job to keep them from being within Placer County. And if we can't find a place here, the law says we have to look elsewhere. And then it's up to my counterparts in those counties to put up their best fight to keep it from happening. But my job is to make sure that our county is safe, and that's what we ultimately did. We located a property, or the Department of State Hospitals located a property in Amador County that was secured temporarily through a financial hold of the Department of State Hospitals. And in that period of time, between 2022 and 2023, the law changed. And it redefined what you had to do to establish extraordinary circumstances before you can go beyond the county. And because we had not yet placed him, we were subject to that sort of new procedure. So essentially, he came back again to Placer County so that they could continue the search, because it was not considered exhaustive at that point. So the Department of State Hospitals and Liberty continued to find locations. They secured an additional location in the Sheridan area. That was secured. We were gearing up to fight that location when that location became unavailable at some point as well. Back to the drawing board we went. Tim, I think that was in 2023, if I remember the dates for the Sheridan property. And the court ordered the Department of State Hospitals and Liberty Healthcare to continue their search. And that went from 2024 up until the spring of 2025. In 2024, they had secured a location here in Alta. That was the location they placed a financial hold on in 2024. In the spring of 2025, in March, we were alerted by the Department of State Hospitals that they no longer felt that Mr. Stevenson was suitable for conditional release. That was good news to our office and to the community, because we thought we had hit a break and that he had done something to warrant remaining in the Department of State Hospitals, which is how everyone on this housing committee, and I'll talk about what that committee is in just a second, what we all felt. And it's all public information. He had indicated that he was still having fantasies about one of his prior victims, and that he had violated some rules by hiding some contraband on behalf of another patient inside some contraband on behalf of another patient inside the Department of State Hospitals. They had indicated they no longer thought he was suitable for conditional release. We filed a motion with the court immediately to revoke that conditional release, and that case, by the time we could get into court by October, that was the next court hearing we were able to secure to litigate this issue. In that period of time, the Department of State Hospitals changed their opinion and said, we now reverse course. We do believe he has been successfully rehabilitated and treated, even though the period of time that had lapsed since his internal rule violations was a mere 6 months. Not nearly, in my opinion, nor the opinion of our team, enough time to be able to fully achieve that sort of redemption and rehabilitation that we have been waiting for. So then the court, because we had that hold, or the Department of State Hospitals had that financial hold on Alta, it became time for the court to say, all right, this appears to be a suitable address. We had a housing meeting where we didn't learn much from the Department of State Hospitals about what their intentions were, and then we received notice a few weeks ago that they had secured this location and they do intend, they formally acknowledge that this is where they intend to place him. That triggers a 30-day window. We then at that time learned the address. That's when we put it out to all of you and our community to say, this is our window. It's a 30-day period of time where we get to examine and learn about the property. Presumably, it had already met those minimum standards, not near a park, not near a school, and I know we've got a lot of opinions on that we are anxious to hear tonight. But those were the minimums that the Department of State Hospitals were supposed to check before they officially indicated this is their intention to place him. They gave us that indication. We are in that 30-day window. So just to sort of define the issue for what we're doing at the February 13th hearing, the judge will make a decision whether or not this is an appropriate location. And if the judge finds this to be an appropriate location, he will make the order that Mr. Stevenson is to be released. This is based on the recommendation by the Department of State Hospitals over the objection of everyone on our housing committee. So, do we want him released at all? No, we've been upfront about that at every step. But ultimately, that decision is based on the recommendation of the Department of State Hospitals and ultimately a decision on the part of the Superior Court judge. I will say the judge has a number of interests that he has to balance when he makes this decision. He has the liberty interests of Mr. Stevenson. Mr. Stevenson has served his sentence. He has been involuntarily committed to a state hospital for more time than he spent in prison even. And he has a Sixth Amendment and 14th Amendment right to liberty at some point in this process. And the judge is balancing that with public safety. That balance is a real easy call in the opinion of myself, my friend the sheriff, Supervisor Gustafson. That balance is real easy to make. It is not worth the risk. We have had several opportunities, I will use air quotes for opportunities, to have public comment at these housing committee meetings where the entire staff of the Department of State Hospitals and Liberty Healthcare attend remotely from their offices in Sacramento, not even bothering to come to Placer County to look us in the eye and stand face to face with the decisions they've made and the recommendations. And they have said that they think he should be released. And the court has to weigh those. So the purpose of the hearing on the 13th is for the court to formally decide whether or not this is an appropriate location here in Alta. That decision must be guided by information we provide to the court. We are doing our research, but there is no better resource to truly understand the dynamics of this location without your input. I have talked to a number of you in separate conversations about issues that might make this location inappropriate. The way we can handle tonight, we're gonna hear from a bunch of other folks up here, and then at the end, we're gonna have a Q&A. If there is specific information that you have regarding this address, if there is a reason you think that specifically this address is inappropriate based on its location or some feature of it that makes it ineligible, let us know. The vehicle by which we tell the court is through our filing. The court, unlike the housing committee meeting or even unlike tonight, doesn't have a public comment. The judge is not going to say, here's the microphone, everyone, tell me what you think. But he has to hear from us. So the way you can have input is by telling us your information, by submitting it either through the portal, emailing it to our office, or telling us here tonight so that we can document it appropriately. And then we will attach it into our court filing so that it goes directly to the court. He has to read and consider everything that we submit. Now, I will tell you, your instinct is probably, I want to tell him why this is a terrible idea and this man shouldn't be let out, and I agree with you. I will tell you, realistically, the court will probably not consider those comments at all, because that decision has already been made. We will continue to say that. We all continue to shout that from the rooftops, but really the issue before the court is specific to this address. So while I'm happy to hear the frustration and will acknowledge that, just keep in mind that we're going to be limited to what we can tell the court with regard to this specific address. If there is another opportunity for us to litigate whether or not he should be remanded back into the Department of State Hospitals to continue treatment, we will harness your voices once again. But we wanted you to understand what the process is, what the court is going to be deciding, because what I don't want you to do is just say, hey, I don't want this guy out, and have the court disregard that. I want your voices and to have meaning and power behind it. So that's the purpose of tonight and the purpose of our portal. That is, hopefully you've been checking out our website to be able to stay up on key dates, and you can submit information directly to us through there. It'll get transmitted directly to our prosecution team, and by team I mean Tim, who is our prosecutor in court, who will submit all of that information here. One of the law changes I mentioned earlier, and then I'll turn it over to my friend the sheriff here. One of the things that changed during that period of time during the law regarding extraordinary circumstances on when we can go out of county was the creation of this housing committee. The intent of the law, the design, was to allow for input by local stakeholders by law, that has to be the DA, the sheriff, or the local law enforcement agency if we're talking about a city. But here, every location has been in the unincorporated area, which means it falls on the sheriff, our county council, and the defense attorney for Mr. Stevenson, as well as members of the Department of State Hospitals and Liberty Healthcare. I will tell you this, the intention of the law did not translate into its practical application. We have been shut out from most of the information from the Department of State Hospitals to the point that we have called for audits. I've asked the state auditor to audit the Department of State Hospitals. We've tried to sponsor legislation to change the notice and the information that is provided or not provided in advance. We will continue to fight those fights. That doesn't solve the immediate problem tonight with the Alta Dutch Flat community and Mr. Stevenson, but we will continue to sort of keep our eye on the long game so that other communities don't have to go through this, and we will continue to inform our community of those efforts. But what it requires, and this is the tension, and I just want to tell you this so you understand how we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. The law requires we participate in the placement of Mr. Stevenson, which is very challenging because we are opposing his release in the first place. And the law says if you fail to participate in the process of helping find the locations, the judge can prevent extraordinary circumstances from ever being found, and we can never go beyond the boundaries of Placer County. So literally, if we refuse to participate in finding or vetting a location for Mr. Stevenson, our lack of participation can be used to say, you have not fulfilled your obligation under the law, therefore we will not entertain extraordinary circumstances, and you cannot look beyond Placer County. Do I want to dump him somewhere else? No, but I don't want him within the boundaries of Placer County, and I took an oath to the people in this room, not to the people of other counties. They've got sheriffs and DAs who can fight that fight if they need to. But that's the issue. So we are simultaneously opposing his release and being required to participate. That doesn't mean we have to go find homes. That is the part of Department of State Hospitals and Liberty. But what it does mean is we can vet these locations. And the only way to truly understand the character and nature of a community is by harnessing the power of the people who live here. So that is why we are here tonight, to provide you an opportunity to tell us what we may not know, and to go over some of the things. Part of the requirements that Mr. Stevenson will have to abide by is a release plan and a monitoring plan by the Department of State Hospitals. It's going to include some form of GPS monitoring. It's going to include actual supervision and transportation to his treatment or any of the services he may need. That is borne by the Department of State Hospitals. They are required to monitor. They can ask for help. It's up to them to ask for help, and we'll talk about some of those issues tonight. But that is what they are supposed to do, but we are thrust into this position of having to try and help in a process that we fundamentally disagree with, which is why you will see Tim Wirtz, who is our prosecutor, members of the Sheriff's Office, members of County Council on this committee to try and get as much information as we can from the Department of State Hospitals, and it has been a trickle, and it has been, unfortunately, a pathetic flow of information to people who desperately want and needed that information to make the appropriate safeguards. So we will make suggestions and recommendations and requests of the court specific to his monitoring plan, and if there are areas or locations that we have to ask the court to make sure he is not allowed to get anywhere near, we'll do that. If ultimately the court does decide that this is the location, we can still have input as to what we think the appropriate mechanisms of supervision are and whether or not what Department of State Hospitals is proposing is sufficient or not. So we are dealing with that tension, but as I was saying, that's why Tim is in the meetings and I'm in front of the cameras blasting the Department of State Hospitals, because I don't want Tim to be accused of not participating fully in his obligation. And if the Department of State Hospitals wants to call me names and come after me, they're free to. But until then, I'm going to use this microphone to criticize the way they're doing business, because they operate in secrecy. They operate under the power of bureaucrats who are not accountable to anyone and don't feel the need to explain their decision-making to anyone. And ultimately, this is a risk assessment they are doing. They are saying, we think he's okay, and we are saying it is not worth the risk. and ultimately the court made that decision, and now we have to say, here's why this particular location is or is not appropriate. So thank you all for coming tonight. I'm going to have the sheriff come up, talk a little bit, and then you'll hear from Supervisor Gustafson. At the end, we'll come back up and do a Q&A and just sort of have an open dialogue on whatever questions you may have. But I will say, through this difficult process, one thing that has shown clear is the resiliency, of our community, particularly the Alta Dutch Flat community. I mean, it is impressive just looking tonight into this sea of people. But I will tell you, as you know, being in law enforcement in Placer County, there is no one else I'd rather stand shoulder to shoulder with in this fight than our sheriff's office and my friend Wayne Wu. He shares the same dedication and passion I do to fighting this process. He has stated and echoed, and we have reinforced the process and our desire to not have Mr. Stevenson released in our community. So I will tell you, from the district attorney's perspective, our sheriff's office has been tremendous and has done everything they can do to stop this process, and when it can't be stopped, to make sure it is a process that tries to ensure public safety at its finest. So without any further words from me, let me introduce my friend and partner in the criminal justice system, Sheriff Wayne Wu.
Thank you, Morgan. Well, good evening, everybody. It's great to see such a wonderful turnout. My name is Wayne Wu. I'm proudly serving as your Placer County Sheriff. Unfortunately, we're up here gathering to discuss this topic. You know, Morgan talked about the frustration we've had with the Department of State hospitals. I think at every single meeting they've had for years going over this, we've asked them to show up in Placer County and speak to our residents and hear from them. And so while I see all of you here and other elected officials, I see nobody from the state or the Department of State hospitals, which is why we need your help. We are here asking for your help tonight. Morgan explained the process, the state of the process that we're currently in. My deputy sheriffs, we have pretty good knowledge of this area, but we can't do it without all of you, just the same way we serve this community. We're not successful without a team effort and input from all of you. So we're really here tonight to hopefully educate you on the process, what's happened so far, what's going to happen, but more importantly, ask for your help, for you to provide some of that mitigating information that we can arm Morgan's team with and bring back to court. Now, I know a lot of you are very frustrated because we live in a rural area because of that rural way of life. You want to let your kids run in the woods. You want to get out of that urban environment, and this seems like a big city problem coming into a rural town, which makes it twice as frustrating. And honestly, I believe that they picked a rural area because they've had such a difficult time in a suburban or urban environment with disqualifying information from schools or parks being too close, which is why it's even more important that we arm ourselves together and we fight this fight. Now, from the beginning, I've made it perfectly clear that I have no faith or confidence in the state, the Department of State hospitals, or the CONREP program. That's what they call it, the Conditional Release Program, the CONREP program. And I think, honestly, Mr. Stevenson's failures in this program, he is the example of why it doesn't work. He's already failed out of this program one time. They determined he was cured again and ready to come back out into the community. During that process, just 6 months ago, the DA explained they determined he wasn't eligible to come out again. He was still sick, and now miraculously in 6 months, they want to release him into our community. And I would argue that even the Department of State hospitals, they won't say it publicly, doesn't have the confidence that Mr. Stevenson is ready to come out into this community, just by the mere fact that the location they've secured, they're only going to allow him access on the bottom floor. Because on the top floor, he can possibly see into other windows, expose himself, do other things. So he would be locked off from the second story, which to me, right there, shows that the Department of State hospitals lacks confidence in his release. Now, our local jurisdiction, Morgan kind of mentioned it to you and discussed the process. This law recently changed where we have to participate in this housing committee. And Morgan explained to you what happens if we don't. make no mistake, do not mistake our participation by being on the Housing Committee. And my investigations Lieutenant Tyler Neer over here next to Deputy DA Tim Wirtz, he's my representative on the Housing Committee. Make no mistake that our participation means we support Mr. Stevenson's release into this community. But when Morgan explained to you on the front end how his criminal trial then evolved and his sentence, and that he's on a civil hold. It's important to note because really technically Mr. Stevenson is not in custody, meaning when he gets released, if he gets released, he doesn't have any kind of probation or parole. We as the sheriff's office will have no authority over him for, say, search and seizure conditions or anything like that. Mr. Stevenson's supervision is the responsibility of the Department of State Hospitals. Morgan talked about they're going to put him on a GPS monitor. We've expressed our concerns about all the things from cell service, GPS service, all of the issues that you can have up here on the mountain and that can occur with Mr. Stevenson being housed here and how they're going to adequately monitor him. To asking the questions of what happens if he cuts off his GPS monitor. And they have a process where they'll check, and they will check on him, but at the end of the day, they will have to send somebody up from Sacramento to confirm that he's actually left the house, which we explained was unacceptable, and what happens if it's inclement weather. I don't know if this will make you feel better or worse, probably worse like it made me feel, is that the Department of State Hospitals has already secured with your tax dollars snowplow service to the driveway all year long to make sure they can have access to his residence if they needed to. So our plan moving forward is we're going to ask for your help tonight. We're hoping you guys have some information you can share that we can arm with the district attorney and he can go into court and help stop this placement. However, if it does move forward, we're also going to be asking to place some additional terms and conditions upon his release to where the sheriff's office can have some involvement, at least allow to have access to his GPS monitor. I would really love to have search and seizure conditions for my deputy sheriffs, and I would assign him. We have it's called a 290 detective. It's a sexual offender detective. That's all he does is monitor sexual offenders in Placer County. I would love to put Mr. Stevenson on that caseload and have that responsibility. And so what I'm going to do is, of course, offer my assistance to the Department of State Hospitals in helping to ensure that Mr. Stevenson is adequately supervised by members of the sheriff's office as well. Now, hopefully it doesn't get to that point. That's why we're here tonight, asking for all of your help. But I promise you, this is just as upsetting to the district attorney and I assure you that we will both be at your side and use every resource at our disposal to try to fight this placement and fight Mr. Stevenson coming up here into the Alta community. So thank you for being here tonight. And with that, I would like to introduce your district supervisor, Cindy Gustafson. Honestly, without her support, Morgan and I couldn't do what we do. She's a staunch supporter for public safety. So with that, Cindy Gustafson.
I can't thank you all enough for turnout. I mean, I thought we'd have a packed house. I had no idea how many would show up. And so thank you. This is incredible. And I stand before you as your supervisor, but more importantly, as a mother and a grandmother. And I think for all of us out there, we know our job is to protect our children first and foremost. Sorry, I get choked up about this. We've been fighting this for 4 years. We did not want this individual in our county. We didn't think he was ready based on our criteria of assuming less risk. But we have been dealt this hand. I got that call a week ago Friday night in an evening hour. When the DA calls you on a Friday night after hours, you know it's probably not good. And it was the worst thing I could think of because all of you know that Placer County thrives on our rural communities. Our rural communities, to us, our parks are the woods and the streams and the open spaces that our kids play in. We don't have that many parks in our rural communities of fields like a traditional suburban park. These are our parks. This is where people can disappear and children can be taken advantage of. And that is why we're fighting so hard. I am beyond grateful for having the best DA and sheriff in the state of California. Please join me in thanking them. You know, as supervisors, we do lots of things, but they are the ones who are the boots on the ground protecting you and going after the people that need to be put away and stay put away. And they have fought so hard on this, and we need to all get behind them and continue to fight. You have information. Many of you have already shared it. We look forward to hearing that tonight. And I just encourage you to reach out to my office, use the code, get us the information you have, the knowledge you have of this area. I know when I drove out, the next day I drove out, I lost cell service twice getting to the property. So how does GPS work? How can you say that you're going to be able to tell where he is? We all know living in rural terrain, in the mountains and in the woods, we lose cell service. So how is the state going to know? And we don't know who the person is from the state, and obviously the sheriff doesn't. So we need your help on all of this and fighting it. I am so pleased not only to have the sheriff and the DA here to answer your questions, because I still have many, but Assemblymember Hadwick, our assembly member, drove up to be here tonight to show her support for this community. And Anthony DiMatteo, my counterpart in District 3, who also represents, while he represents Rockland, he represents a lot of ag land and open space as well. We are a team fighting as our Board of Supervisors with our law enforcement to protect you, and that is our first and foremost responsibility. So thank you. Assemblymember, would you like to say a few words? I'll start with you, and then I think the superintendent of schools also wanted to say a few words. Anthony, too.
Hello, I didn't know I was speaking, so I'm going to be very brief. I just want you to know that our office is fighting this along with Senator Dowley's with everything we have. As a mother, I come from Modoc County, I grew up in Siskiyou County, so we need you guys to engage to prove that rural communities are not dumping grounds for these folks. So please submit your comments and follow the instructions, because they are very specific. But that public pressure and that voice is what we need right now. And share it on social media, blast it to everybody you can. We have to spread the word to get this stopped. So thank you guys for showing up.
Thank you guys again. I didn't expect to speak. I just here for moral support, but
We appreciate that.
yeah, thank you. And these guys this whole team is fantastic. We're very blessed to have them. What I did learn today is that Supervisor Bonnie Gore, when this gentleman was released in Roseville, it was in her neighborhood. Unbeknownst to her, she was on the city council of Roseville at the time. I guess the positive thing out of that is that everybody knew who he was. The neighborhoods kept his eyes on them, and he never left the house, and hence the reason he got somehow on the internet and they got picked back up. But it was a community like this that kept him pretty much locked up inside of his house, being that he was in the city, because everybody saw him, everybody knew where he was at, and they let people know where he was at, so he never left the house. So I have a couple questions, I guess, for Morgan and his team, if we want to start with that. There was a house in Roseville that he was in, was also a 2-story house. So if housing will not allow them to go upstairs, why do they continue to place them in 2-story houses? You know, again, we kind of got to get back to common sense, but this is California, so we don't have that right now. And I can't run for governor because my chief of staff won't let me. Another question that I just found out from this gentleman sitting in the front row, that he homeschools. Do homeschools qualify as being schools? So just those questions. And again, thank you. I'm here for you guys. You guys can't vote for me, but I get to vote for you. So, and I will support all of them.
Thank you. Where did Shanna go? Yes, Shanna.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Shanna Brown, and I'm the superintendent principal of the Alta Dutch Flat School District. There are only 2 superintendent principals within the Placer County, and I'm one of them. The other one has 2 vice principals. I do not. It is just me. That tells you how small we are. I am here to formally express the serious concerns of our school district and community regarding the placement of a designated sexually violent predator within the boundaries of our district, and to impress upon you that the placement impedes our ability as a school to do our prescribed job of creating and maintaining a safe learning environment for all of our students. Our concerns are not grounded in speculation, but in the unique and well-documented conditions of this region. Our district is a very small K-8 public school with 100 students, 6 teachers, about another 10 staff members, and me as administration. We are one of the smallest, if not the smallest. We are the smallest district and one of the smallest schools in Placer County. We serve young children in a geographically isolated area with limited infrastructure and resources. The rugged terrain of the area makes it such that vast portions here are characterized by unreliable cellular and GPS coverage. These limitations significantly impair the ability of residents, school personnel, and first responders to communicate quickly and accurately with the school in the event of an emergency. Inclement weather is a frequent and persistent reality in our community, which is why we have snow days and close. Severe winter conditions routinely restrict road access for both local roads as well as Interstate 80, and at times render travel hazardous or impossible. These same conditions substantially limit the ability of the Sheriff's Department and other emergency services to access certain areas, such as that on Alta Oaks, in a timely manner. In addition, our community experiences frequent power outages as a result of storms and weather-related infrastructure impacts. These outages further reduce visibility, communication, and overall situational awareness during critical incidents. The district must also emphasize that many of our students walk to and from school daily, often along rural roads without sidewalks, with limited lighting and minimal supervision. Furthermore, high school students routinely travel by county-operated bus to the local high school, creating predictable schedules and transit routes that cannot be easily altered. Current estimates indicate that law enforcement response times in this area regularly exceed 30 minutes under normal conditions and may be significantly longer during adverse weather or power disruptions. This response time presents a substantial concern when evaluated in the context of student safety and emergency preparedness. Our district does not have a school resource officer on our campus in any regularly scheduled capacity, which further increases our concern regarding monitoring and enforcement. Finally, the property in question is located adjacent to recreational areas that are regularly accessed by our children, our families, and our community members. These areas are integral to our community's quality of life, but also increase the frequency of contact between vulnerable populations and the surrounding environment. Not only do some of our families live very close to the designated property, but our students regularly ride dirt bikes and bicycles, they hike and swim in that area. As school leaders, we are legally and morally obligated to provide a safe educational environment. That obligation extends beyond the school campus and includes consideration of how community conditions affect student safety before and after school hours. As a small one school district, our financial and staff resources are already stretched incredibly thin. Placing a dangerous person within our district boundaries further saddles us in an unfair and onerous manner, which adds undue stress and strain to our already limited resources. Given the age of our students, the lack of immediate emergency response capacity, and the daily travel pattern of our children, this placement decision directly undermines our ability to fulfill our duty to provide a safe educational environment for our students. We recognize the importance of rehabilitation and lawful reintegration. However, placement decisions must account for the vulnerability of specific communities. a small, rural K-8 school district with limited services, minimal law enforcement presence, and a population of young children is not an appropriate or responsible location for the release of a violent sexual offender. I respectfully urge reconsideration of this placement and to identify an alternate location that can provide appropriate supervision, monitoring, and access to services without placing our children at heightened risk. Thank you for your time.
Amazing, thank you. Are there any other elected officials that would like to say anything before we go to the Q&A? I don't see anyone else. Sean or Carolyn? Okay, you've already introduced yourselves. Okay, then I'm going to turn it back over to Morgan Geyer and hope we can engage with some questions and answers for you.
I was going to tell Tim this in private, but since I have a microphone, I will. The court is poised to allow a few sort of people of responsibility to speak in court, and I think you just found one of your speakers. So block out the morning of February 13th if you don't mind, or the day. I mean, if a lot of the questions are about the legal process, and I'll start off, but I'm gonna lean on my partners here to help us answer the questions, including Tim and Tyler. And remember, tonight, a lot of tonight is for us to get information, so don't be offended if a lot of the answers to your questions tonight are, that's a good comment, we're gonna write that down and either circle back to you, or we're gonna put that on the list and figure out how to frame that in an argument. So if I don't have the answer for you tonight, it's because we're gonna take that information or whatever you're giving us, and we're gonna either figure out an answer or take that information and put it into a context that we think will be the most persuasive for the court. So I just wanted to give that disclaimer in advance. But we've had 3 or 4 community housing meetings, and when the committee sort of goes back and our guys are not allowed to talk to anybody and the committee doesn't answer questions, it sort of has left a void. So I've sort of filled that void with the Q&A. So I think I know some of the questions, but lay them on us and we'll do the best we can. If there's something that we're gonna need to look into, then if you wanna hang around and give your contact information to our communications team, I'm happy to circle back. I make personal phone calls to folks that reach out so that I can try and answer the questions as best we can if we don't have it tonight. But enough of me talking, fire away if you've got questions. I think we have Elise and we have Stephanie working, or Sophie with microphones in the back. Perfect. So. And we've got.
This is the gentleman I was asking about who has his kids.
Yeah, Morgan, Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Wu, I want to thank you guys for your work. This man would be placed next door to me. He'd be 400 feet from my property. World's been turned upside down the past week. As a pastor, I have to start off by saying this, that I believe in the hope and redemption of Jesus Christ and the good news and the gospel. I personally know men that have been down this path and have been redeemed, healed, and fought the evil of this. After even learning more information from the sheriff, this man is not a healed man who's having sexual fantasies about his victim less than a year ago. My daughters, I have a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old who could literally be 150 feet. This man their property line comes right to their back living room and bedroom and bathroom. Standing on Alta Oaks Road, this man could peer into their windows. My daughters have been fearful. My 19-year-old has been asking if she can get a CCW. My 16-year-old has been asking if I can train her on my shotgun. We've been a homeschool family for 11 years. We've been a part of different charter schools, co-ops, and different hybrid formats. And I learned recently this past week that we have 24 homeschool families up here. These are kids that are primarily home all day, on top of the hundreds of kids that we just heard from the principal at Alta Dutch Flat Elementary. What I've learned in this process is that sexually violent predators cannot be within a quarter mile. And this is important to hear. The judge, our emotions, our hatred of this, the illogical part of this, the judge does not make decisions based on this. And friends, we live in California. Welcome to California. This is why we're in this mess. And so being a homeschool family and doing my diligence and digging in other cases around our state, I'm here to share with you tonight that I am now the executive director of Little Bear Creative Academy, and we are a legally formed private school. And we're relying on the DA's office to continue to fight for us, for the people. But I do want to put one request. What I've learned in these cases is there's two ways that these things have been stopped. One, there's a school within a quarter mile. The second one is for the homeowner to back out of the lease, which I'm sure there's financial implications of that. The homeowner is a mother of 3 kids and a nurse. Supposedly what I've heard, a nurse. And I'm dumbfounded of how this could be. And I ask our community to pray for the homeowner, that her heart, that this family's heart would be softened to withdraw and remove this chaos from our community. Morgan and Tim, right? Godspeed for you guys. Fight for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Dustin.
I get a microphone. This is great. Hi, I'm Kevin Besner with Little Bear Tree Farm. We live right below Alta Oaks. We have thousands of families that come to us every single year during Christmas, before Christmas, during the summer, to come cut down a family tree. It's been in existence for decades here in the community. Literally, you can look down onto the tree farm. How can that not be a public place, public park? It's not public, but how can that not be like a pinball, arcade or something like that? So please reach out. That can't happen.
Yeah, and we will, and I will say, these places sometimes are not considered by courts until they are. So it's our job to raise that issue, and if this is a chance to make new law based on a judge who says, I think based on that it makes this property inappropriate, we'll lodge that with the court.
You can literally look down on families during the Christmas season cutting trees from where he's at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
All right,
appreciate
thank
the
you.
comments, and we are aware. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name's Christina Miller. I'm an Alta resident, and I would like to comment on the law enforcement. So I live down a road that we've had major speeding problems, which I have reported to CHP, which sometimes they get hung up on. Obviously, that's not like a life or death situation. But my concern, besides the NIMBY, the not my backyard, is should we lose, are we going to have dedicated law enforcement here? Because this predator, child predator, is in a location where should something go wrong, there are no neighbors to hear the screams. And that's true of a lot of our community. Most of our houses are kind of spaced far apart. Not to mention, we have road closures all the time, right? So what's the ETA? Should we have a situation not having law enforcement present here, and we have, forbid, a couple of big rigs, which happens every month, right? Flipping, catching on fire, so on and so forth. So that's my concern. And thank you all for being here and listening to me.
Did you want to comment on that? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. It's very valid concerns. As all of you know, when you choose to live in a very rural area, sometimes emergency services aren't like, the response times aren't what you'd expect down in the city. If you call 911, you're not going to have a patrol car there within 3 or 4 minutes. But that's why we love living in rural communities. That's some of the trade-off. So one of the reasons that we are going to ask, if for some reason we fail in this opposition, to participate and put some terms and conditions upon this release to where the sheriff's office can be involved. Like I mentioned, we actually posed the question of if they cut their GPS bracelet off. And they had commented, well, they do die sometimes. And we have methods to check and do all these other things to confirm that he has not left the residence. But at the end of the day, once all that failed, their answer was to send somebody from Sacramento up to then confirm. Then they would notify law enforcement. Now, for me, that's obviously way too long. I'm sure all of you feel the same way, which is why we want to be active participants as far as the sheriff's office is concerned with some of the terms and conditions of his release. Now, the other thing is many of you guys have lived up here for a very long time, and you remember the days of resident deputy sheriffs up here on the mountain. And unfortunately, those resident deputy sheriff positions were casualties of the Great Recession, and we've never received those positions back as the sheriff's office. They got swept when in lieu of layoffs and other issues. We haven't been able to get them back, but we do have a couple of units. I mentioned our detective that specializes in sex offender caseload throughout the county. We have our special operations unit. We have a new strategic enforcement detail. So we'll mark the house with a hazard premise for our dispatch. We will be doing extra patrols. And if there was an emergency, even though we don't have the resident deputies anymore, our priority one response, meaning like you situation you described with a 911 phone call where it's a dire emergency, our response times up here are still under 10 minutes. 8-9 minutes, I think, is our average, which is not bad from where we're having to come from sometimes. So I hope that answers your question. Nope, hand's still up.
So when you say your response time, sheriff or CHP?
Sheriff's response times, and we ask CHP for assistance up here on the mountain all the time. We couldn't police up here without them. They back our deputy sheriffs. We back them up. They may be closer. Those response times are just sheriff's office. I'm guessing if Gold Run was not busy, they could be here even faster than that.
Okay, because I don't agree with that time frame, although like there's not a lot of violent crime, thank goodness, right? So we don't have a lot of calls. So I just find that time frame unrealistic, especially given, like I said, the road closures on 80 all of the time, the snow. There's just so many factors that I just...
Unacceptable or unrealistic? Because those are our response times.
Unrealistic, I would say, if, you know, like people actually did a little more reporting. I think...
I'd be more than happy to share the data with you on our priority one emergency response times to the area.
I understand that. What I'm trying to point out is, unfortunately, our community doesn't tend to report, is what I'm trying to point out.
Oh, gotcha, yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to say is, should we have an incident, you know, obviously, I think with the community all here, we might change that, but I'm just letting you know, like, I just find that time frame unrealistic if we were reporting crime.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lori Barrows. My husband and I have been out on Alta Oaks for 37 years. I have 3 questions. Is it possible to get the judge's name of the guy who keeps saying he's free? Also, what happens in a fire evacuation? We've been evacuated twice within the last 3 years, and I'm sure as hell not going to let that guy in my car. Who's going to do that? I don't think any of my neighbors are. I don't think our fire people should be, you know, involved in that because that puts them at risk. And I also want to know who has the financial responsibility if somebody is attacked or whatever, who is going to pay the bills? That should not fall on the victims, financial. And another thing is the victim carries this forever. You know, there's no debt to society these guys pay. I am a survivor, but not everybody is a survivor. And I am furious at this. I also want to know that, you know, more on the property. It's 2.5 acres. How are they going to monitor that? Are they going to put like a little doggy, you know, electric collar on them or something? That's too good as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate your comments. I appreciate you sharing your experience. You were right. I mean, the victim's trauma is something they carry with them for a lifetime. And we work closely with our victim services to try and support them as we've done. But you're right, if he were to reoffend and victimize someone else, the costs are borne by society and particularly by the victim themselves. And that's not right. States and state governments have liability, even though they are shielded from it. But we hope and pray that it doesn't happen, and we'll do everything we can to ensure proper safeguards to try. But as it relates to specifically to your question about the monitoring, that's a question we'll have. How do you monitor a 2.5 acre property in the hills? I mean, that is a question that will have to be answered before a judge can say, yes, I'm comfortable with this decision.
And I'm not sure that you're aware that the road, both our road, it goes to a Y, so there is a road on both sides
Yes.
of that property.
No, we're aware, and as far as we're concerned, there's no business Mr. Stevenson would have on the other side of that road at all. And then your points are well taken as to the rest of the property. There may be aspects of that property he has no business. I mean, he's already restricted from the upstairs. Certainly, it's a reasonable request to restrict him from other aspects of the property. So these are all points that are well taken. Thank you.
As far as what Lori has just said, we also have cell towers that freeze up out here. And we'll have days where we can't even get a cell phone out or a line out or anything like that unless you have a landline. So that's another thing you can bring up. And also, does the house have a wood stove in it? And does it have a generator? Are you going to let the guy freeze in there? I mean, you got to think about that too. Everything, all the things that happen out here. And then the wildfires, that snowplow going to come up here and put out that wildfire?
Yeah, those are all fair points. I appreciate them. Thank you.
Hi, Caroline Glenn Preston. I'm a business owner in Colfax and long-term Colfax resident who has several family members that live in the area, and I mean in walking distance of this man and where he's going to go. And I have two things. One, I'm kind of concerned about the fact that he's being put off as a child predator. I'm under the understanding that he targets women of his own age. And two, if they're willing to put out the money and funds for plowers to get in there, then how come we don't ask them to put in the money to maybe put extra officers in the area?
That's a fair point. I will, to your original question, the crimes for which he was sentenced to prison for the 30-year sentence, the victims were adult women. The issue when he was revoked from his conditional release in 2017 related to whether or not he was accessing illicit images of children. So there was a dispute as to whether or not those were the images that were depicted that he was alleged to have viewed were adult or children. So that's how there were, and in his history he had disclosed that he had, prior to committing his crimes, had engaged in indecent behavior, exposing himself, and oftentimes that is children. I don't remember if those were specific to children in those. Both adult and children in his history. And many of those were not reported cases, but self-disclosed through a criminal history and through the course of his treatment. So our concerns are for both. The crimes for which he was committed and sentenced to prison were adult victims. So in our assessment, he poses a risk to all demographics. So that is why we sort of talk about both concerns relating to those.
Sounds like this community has a lot to be concerned about.
It is. I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Good evening. This person most likely has a medical mental health plan. You've pointed out that in his last residence, due to his isolation, that might have created aggravation and helped him to think he should just get on the internet and start a new life that way. So I would like to know what this medical health plan is that they want, because for me, putting somebody in a self-made prison in an isolated wooded area where he's going to be totally isolated and not a part of this community ever. And he can't even walk to the store to get on the county bus to go have a life. Is that not going to create more aggravation? Is that going to create more of a need? Is that going to make him more anxious? Is that going to make him want to become the person that unfortunately he organically is? And so I would like to be able to present to the judge a valid medical reason why his situation is not going to be conducive to his health. Not that I really am too worried about his health, but the truth is, if he's not healthy, he's just going to get more unhealthy in a 2-acre prison.
Well,
And put up 11-foot fence, electrocuted fence like Stalag 17 all the way around it.
Yeah.
And the homeowner can do that too.
You bring up a fantastic point. The purpose of this conditional release is for him, I mean, in theory, is for him to be out and continue his treatment. I would hope and I would expect, as a taxpayer and as the DA of Placer County, that the doctors at the Department of State Hospitals have this exact concern and have designed a treatment plan to eliminate the risk that comes from depression and isolation, or they should say that this is not the right location or he's not suitable for conditional release. If you can't further your treatment because you are being isolated from others based on your behavior, then in my opinion, you still have more treatment to do inside the confines of a state hospital. And this is the crux of the argument that we will make to the court and that we have made is if the conditions under which he's released do not promote his treatment, then we eliminate the conditions of his release and we put him in a safe environment where he's free to continue his treatment. That's the only way we can prove it. Exactly, and I will say that the difficulty is we won't know what that treatment plan is because that is when the Department of State Hospital cites HIPAA and says, we cannot tell you what we do to further his treatment. We can tell you where we put him and what we want to do, but the specifics of the treatment plan, we probably will never be privy to up until they file some sort of treatment report that says we need to reduce his level of supervision or we need to increase it.
Well, as a nurse for 30 years, I know that there's gold standards and there are treatment plans based on empirical evidence on other cases. So we can use other cases that have proven that isolation and segregation is probably not helpful to
Yes.
mental illness.
And I would hope the doctors at the Department of State Hospital have thought that out and have not left it to a DA and a sheriff to tell them that. But fingers crossed. We've had to tell them things already that I didn't think I'd have to tell them.
Hi, sorry, just a quick question. In a small community like us, you had said earlier that it's important that we raise our voice or send an email or Facebook. Should we all have one general letter and send it, or should we all individually write what we want to say? Because, you know, when you write a letter and you sign it, it just goes through passing years, right? You know, it all looks the same. What would be your advice for us to be heard as such a small community in a big, you know, we're a little fish in a big pond. Like, should we each individually write, or should we all have this community letter that we all sign? Like, what do you think would be the best situation for us?
I would say, and I'm free to entertain any disagreement from the team, I would say tell your individual perspective. Tell your voice and what it is in your experience or in your situation that fuels you to want to speak out. It is the collective group, but it is the individual perspective of each member of that group that really will make a difference. I think the form letter gets disregarded too easily, and everyone views the same situation from a different perspective, and the more perspectives we get to the court, the better of an informed decision they can make. So. Well, and we can tweak the guidance on the portal, but for those that are here, please feel free to do it that way because it is your unique perspective that is really the whole point of this 30-day period, and the whole reason we're here tonight is to get that perspective. Thank you for the question.
I have a question, if I may. Ken Barrows has lived on Alta Oaks Road, long time, grew up here. Do we have any other legal course we can run other than showing up on the 13th for this meeting with the judge?
At this point, no. The decision is in the hands of the Superior Court judge. If he rules to release, it is a decision that we could ask for review. The problem becomes, as long as the judge is weighing the things that he needs to appropriately weigh, the law gives him the discretion to make the decision. The legal standard by which we would try and either appeal or challenge the decision is what's called an abuse of discretion standard. It means the judge's decision has to be so far outside the bounds of what he's supposed to consider, and he won't do that. I mean, he knows what the issues are, and he'll make a decision that he believes to be the right one, even if we disagree with it, which means our success of challenging it is very unlikely. At some point, somebody's got to make the call, and the law has given this Superior Court judge the ability to make the call. Our job is to arm him with all the information so that he makes the right call.
Is that a Placer County Superior?
It is. It's a judge on the Placer County Superior Court. Same judge has this case, yes, that's been assigned all along.
Okay, everyone, we're going to get to everyone. We're doing kind of a counterclockwise loop, so I'm seeing everyone here. We have a couple of people here, but we're going to go over to that corner and continue clockwise. We will get to everyone, though. We're seeing you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jessica Lohman. I'm Colfax Elementary School Board President. And I mean, like everyone here, I have serious concerns about this person being released into the community. I really appreciate what PCSO and the DA's office is doing. I have a suggestion on placement, as that's something you asked for. And I'm just curious if it's an option to offer to place him at the governor's property up here, about 1.5 miles down the road. Not that I want him in the community, but that's 55 acres that we're already paying to protect, so it would be guarded.
I was going to say that was more of a statement than a question, but I'm going to respond because it does show some of the other things we've been doing. We supported legislation from the Republican senator leader from San Diego to require the Department of State Hospitals to examine creating transitional housing on state property, which is where these individuals belong. The experiment as to whether or not they should be released needs to be done in the confines of other state property and not on the backs of our residents. We supported it. It was the only piece of legislation relating to sexually violent predators that passed because it doesn't have a whole lot of teeth. It just says you must consider using state property. And we will continue to argue for that. We will continue to lobby for it and try to pass legislation to require this housing experiment to be done on state property. So while I appreciate the sentiment of your comment, it actually has some truth to it, and it actually has some sense to it. These costs, both emotional, societal, financial, should be borne out at the state, who has already decided to gamble with this man's gamble with his release. So we'll continue to update you on our efforts to do that, and we may enlist your help to support legislation to try and require the Department of State Hospitals to do that. I'm going to defer to the microphones in the back.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I am a resident of Alta. I have a son that walks every single day from Alta Powerhouse to the school and home every single day. And I would like to say, my question is this person confined to this home 24 hours a day with no exception to get essential needs? Because the Alta store is literally within walking distance of the school, and a lot of the kids go and hang out at that store after school. And Mrs. Brown said it perfectly. Schedules are easily, you're able to easily catch on to people's schedules. And my question is, are they allowed to get essential needs at the one and only store that is addressed in Alta? Locals know we have Dutch Flat. And then on top of that are they confined to certain hours that they are to leave, or do they get to leave when school ends?
Yeah, that's a good question. All of that is supposed to be detailed in the monitoring plan that the Department of State Hospitals will present to the court. Those will be some of the big things that we ask the court, or we offer suggestions, like he doesn't go into the local market, or he can't go unsupervised to any other location. All of these things will be detailed in a plan. Theoretically, they should already be in our hands so that we know the answers to these questions. We shouldn't be standing up here tonight not having the answer to that question, but here we are. So the 13th will be a time where we ask those questions and we raise them in advance to the court, and if the court can't answer them, then that should give the court pause to say maybe we're not quite ready to do this yet until we do have answers. And if the answers to those questions are insufficient, for example, if they said, well, between the daylight hours he can have this amount of liberty, he hasn't earned that yet, and as of now that is unacceptable in all of our opinions. So we will be asking for the maximum amount of supervision at all times, but we'll have to wait to see what the treatment plan, or supervision plan, I don't believe we have a supervision plan at this point. So he's supposed to be supervised at all times for everything. Whether or not that means he's allowed to go to places that he can get essential items, but he can do it with someone supervising him, we don't know what the position is going to be. But rest assured, we will be demanding the utmost supervision, and that he not put himself in positions that you just described in the local market. But excellent question, thank you.
Hi, Sheila Wood. This is for Little Bear. I went on to the internet, Google, Gemini, and I said, How could a man get from this location to that location, and would it be a threat, and could he be monitored while he was moving? No. 2 minutes off the side of that ravine, and he's in a draw. The 4 satellites cannot locate that monitor on his ankle. These sheriffs that protect us, there's no roads. They can't find him. In 10 minutes along the same elevation line to Little Bear, under 10 minutes, he's standing in a stand of fir trees where his monitor is bouncing off of them and jittering. They can't locate him. They can't get a 3D location at the bottom of the ravine where Little Bear Creek is that runs straight up to Little Bear. Now, Little Bear, I read the definition of Placer County Parks and Recs regarding what is a park, okay? Everything Little Bear does for this community, they don't charge us. We don't have to pay them to go down there and feed the fish or pet the cows or, get a ride to the top of the hill. It's not based on whether or not we're going to buy a tree. That definition falls in line with everything under Parks and Rec's definition, with the exception of they don't own the property. This property is literally adjacent, under 10 minutes. The other 20 minutes that it takes them to get there, somebody in this room is going to make a move. I'm not threatening, I'm just saying. I've been here for 25 years, I've lived in Placer County for 55, okay? I know how people think. And if there is a child that has been injured or in danger, God forbid he's got the child and we can't find him, that is going to, I bet, honestly, 90% of these men stand up. That is what's going to happen in that time, and that's going to put them in jeopardy, it's going to put the man in jeopardy, and it's going to put the child or whoever it is in jeopardy. It's what's going to happen.
Well, I appreciate your comments, particularly on the GDS stuff. Thank you.
Well, hello, my name's Guy Graham. Thank you guys for all your representation. It makes me proud to be part of this community, to see this kind of turnout in a situation like this. As like Dustin, we're within 400 feet of this house. I don't know how much time they put into investigating, surveying, looking at the properties around, like the lady before was saying. 60 feet from the back door of this house is a heavily wooded lot. Our properties, there's 900 acres that butts up to my property, our other neighbor's property. There's waterways that can't be touched with any kind of equipment when they logged and did whatever. So there's green belts that run everywhere, up to the pole lines, all the way up to our other friends at the top of the hill. I mean, there are probably a couple thousand acres that he could disappear to in a heartbeat. And I'm sure they put no time in looking at this stuff. Now, we have concerns. We have 12 grandkids. They're up all the time. We don't restrict our kids to staying in the fence line or anything. And we shouldn't have to. That's why we live up here. I moved up here because I knew I was going to retire in the area, which I've been pretty fortunate to do. But in the last couple weeks, I have dealt with more stress on dealing with this, thinking how disrespectful this neighbor was to not even to consider what the rest of us would think about this. It hits hard. I really feel for everybody in the area, but there are so many of us. Yeah, we seem like we're out in the sticks. We got a subdivision. That's where we live, Alta Oaks. It was developed years ago. And all of our neighbors, everybody knows everybody. If the flashing lights come up the road, they know something's happening. Usually it's me getting carted down the hill, but, and not for bad reasons.
But we understood what you meant.
I'm glad to see that we're all grouping together. We got each other's backs. This is a small community, and we've seen it on the news with this guy. Why us? Leave him where he's at. I don't know what else I could say. It's just, it's pretty close to home, and there can't be a reason for this.
You're right,
No.
Guy.
Thank you, guys.
Good evening. Michael Halverson, Alta resident here with my wife. Been in this community. Department of Transportation brought me up to the area, so I'm well aware of how the snow, not being able to get into this area, how dangerous it is. Really troubles me, like this gentleman just said, the amount of stress worrying about our community. My wife, other women around here, all ages, kids, they walk around freely. On this area right here in the summertime, very popular place for women to walk and hike alone. There's a water hole in the Bear. It's local. Women there. A woman could be attacked and drug off into the woods and nobody would ever know. No. I mean, this area is so rural and hard to travel that you could be screaming in agony pain and nobody would hear you. So my question is, what would it take to make a park that meets the criteria to?
I appreciate that. The DA is not the right person to ask. I finally get to kick it down to my other elected officials down here. But I appreciate your question.
Yeah, and I'll leave on this note is, it's unfortunate that we see this in our county, in our community, in our state, but we see this happening across our country. I implore everybody more than ever, it's time. The number one problem is we remove God from the equation, and it's broken down our families, it's broken down our community. I say right now, more than ever, it's time for us to go back to the old ways, you know, church, God, coming together as a community, working together, voting for the right people that believe in this not partaking in nonsense. More than ever, we need to come together, we need to align our thoughts, and we need to vote in people that don't allow this kind of thing to happen. That we have to take this country back, otherwise all of our families are in jeopardy. And thank you.
Hi, I'm Sharon Hoover. We have a very large homeschool population in our community. I also have two questions. Do homeschool families count as schools according to the law? And do our physical addresses count as a school if we are homeschooling?
So I'm going to enlist the assistance of Tim here because he's probably more up on the law. It says schools. Really all we can do is read the statute, and if there are any cases where judges have ruled whether or not schools are or are not considered legitimate for purposes of excluding it from this. In a relatively recent case, it was a school that had come into existence after indication that the placement was going to happen, and it was a school. It was not a charter school, or I mean, it was not a homeschool. I believe it was a charter school, and it was ruled to be a school that eliminated that for placement. Homeschool is a question that hasn't been fully vetted out by the appellate courts. That's how we get our guidance. So whether or not the classroom that is the bedroom counts or not is a question mark. We'll present that to the court. If there is sort of more, I'll say, officiality to the homeschool, if it's chartered at a particular address that's near the school, that changes the equation for the judge as well. So we'll take whatever information we have about the existence of schools within that area and present it to the court in our argument that, hey, this is not a suitable address. But homeschool really hasn't been answered. That question, if the charter is in another town, but the student body are in their addresses, is each address a school? It hasn't been decided yes or no. Does the court in this particular instance feel like going out on a limb and saying, I think I'm going to count this as school under my interpretation of the statute? Mr. Stevenson's lawyer will undoubtedly challenge that decision, and it'll go to an appellate court, and we'll ultimately get an answer if that's the case, because that's how the system works. But am I correct on kind of what I said on some of that?
There is a case.
No, come on up. This is Tim Wirtz. He's the prosecutor assigned to the
There actually is a appellate case from just last year, so very recent, where the issue of homeschooling came up, where it was, again, a neighbor of the proposed placement had a homeschool student, but they did essentially work with a charter school that was about 5 miles away. And it's not the Sacramento court, but it was, no, there's a different case after Cheek, that they said that no, that the charter school itself is the school. The fact that they do homework or schoolwork at a home, they said that's more analogous to like homework. So it's not everywhere that someone's doing schoolwork is a school, but it really depends on the facts of, as Morgan was saying, the relation between what that charter is and what the homeschool curriculum is. It is somewhat of an open question, but the recent case suggests that it would not be.
So legally in Placer County and in California, you can file a homeschool affidavit and you can be your own school, and
Right.
take control of your child's education. Would that count as a homeschool?
That one, I have to look at what was actually filed,
Okay.
and so I can't say for sure one way or
And then
another.
I have another question.
Yeah.
They kind of mentioned this, but not to the extent that I'm asking. So how is Mr. Stevenson going to get groceries? I own and operate a learning center, which is a tutoring center for homeschool kids. I tutor 12 homeschool kids on a weekly basis. I rent space from Sierra First Baptist Church. Our local food pantry operates at Sierra First Baptist Church. I can have students on site during pantry hours. I know Sierra First Baptist Church will protect our kids. I know our pastor and our elder board will probably not allow him on site, but would he, according to his release, be allowed to come to local food pantries knowing that there's a learning center on night and the school's just down the street?
So that's a good question. As you said, we haven't seen the actual specific plan for this address, which would include things like, local food banks, that sort of thing. Generally speaking, when someone is placed on this program, initially it is pretty much home confinement. But the idea is that they will eventually be given additional leeway. But at least initially, they would only, if they were allowed to go get food and that sort of things, they'd be transported by a Department of State hospital employee. That person would be with them the entire time. So there would be an actual person supervising them the entire time. But again, the idea is that eventually they work towards total release, so that if they did well for that for several months, then they could modify the plan again, and maybe they would be, just on the ankle monitor doing their grocery shopping. So right now, I don't know specifically his plan, but I can just speak to what is generally seen in these types of cases.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so again, initially, he wouldn't be just free to roam, and even further down the line, based on the specifics of his case, like Maureen mentioned, it was an assault down by the river, like that would probably always be an exclusion zone, but we would have to see the actual plan and discuss that with the court and raise our concerns. Well, again, that's why the GPS is supposed to do, and that's why we're looking into the coverage there.
Yeah, and let me just interject here, and we're just telling you kind of what those definitions are and how the court is going to look at it. We're not saying we agree with that interpretation, and our job is to challenge the court and say, hey, this isn't specifically a park, but by function it is, and you should treat it as such. And if you need to designate this in your mind as a park, then do so, because the statute is written the way it's written, and we can't change it at this point. I do want to invite Assemblymember Hedwick up quickly, because she had a comment about some potential legislation to try and fix some of this.
To the homeschool question, I was a former homeschool parent. It is absolutely a school in my eyes. We are looking into a legislative win for that, or opportunities that are there to make that count, but unfortunately it would not be in the timeline, because everything in California takes a long time.
So on that piece, there's actually legislation that our assembly has created. It's AB 767, and it was intended to protect private school affidavits. It's been amended to strip that and basically get rid of what they're calling this loophole, that if you create a private school after the community notice, then that private school would not block this. And so, I don't know.
We're fighting that as well.
Yeah, kill that bill.
We tried a lot of it in the super minority, so it's a little more work than it should be, but we are.
Yeah, and go ahead.
My name's Isaac Harris. I also live on Alta Oaks. I'm a neighbor with Dustin, Little Bear Tree Farm. As a subcontractor for Tucker and DeSilva Gates on the highway for the last 10 years, one of the biggest tools that our grade setters use is a GPS. I'm personal friends with many grade setters that have worked on all these jobs, and the biggest thing they say is, put the GPS away because it doesn't work here. And the 80 corridor is the largest mass of land with the largest clearing of trees in our whole area, and the GPS doesn't work there. Yeah. I've been working directly across the street from this property for the last 2 weeks. There's absolutely no signal for GPS that's going to work. They might have found one spot for it to ping off of. It's completely unrealistic. And I also want to say everybody about the homeschool thing, even if it was recognized as a school, there's a distance. So if you're not within a quarter mile, it doesn't matter. So they are working on legislation, and we hope that gets shot down. But currently on the school thing, the only thing that has hope is my neighbor Dustin, who has registered as a private school, which is legally recognized. So we hope that's going to help us. But we also have just been made privy that there's a new fact. The Little Bear Tree Farm has 50 acres that adjoins my property. In the last few years, they've acquired a lease for an additional acreage. Their primary property is outside of that distance. The property they've acquired the lease on, as the crows flies, is right behind this property, would definitely be within that distance. Should qualify as a gathering point. And with the volunteering of myself and the rest of the community, I'm sure Kevin would be pretty happy to start a public park. So
I appreciate that.
Thank you. That might help us out there.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate that.
and I
That's
think
very
everybody in
helpful.
the community would volunteer to help make
Yes.
that happen. My question to you is, if this goes the wrong way and this doesn't turn out the way we hope, how long are we looking at before this guy is in my backyard?
That's a good question. The order will probably be immediate, meaning the judge, if he says, I think this is an appropriate place after considering all of these things, assuming he doesn't need time to think about it or review all of the information we're going to give him, the order would probably be effective immediately, meaning the amount of time that it would take the Department of State Hospitals to physically get him out of the state hospital, whatever their transition out process is. I don't think it would be overnight, but I certainly don't think it would be more than a few weeks at most, is my best estimate. I mean, we don't really have, they're all different depending on where they're going and how far they're going and what they have to do to wind down. If he's in the middle of some sort of course or something like that, I wouldn't expect it to be more than a couple of weeks. I don't know. I mean, we will ask. We will demand that. We'll probably ask for a court order that we be notified when the Department of State Hospitals indicates that they're going to do it, but we'll be on alert That's for certain, and I would imagine the court would be pretty sympathetic to us wanting to know when that would take effect. So we will be loud about that. I'll just pause here for 1 second. I know we're running long. If you need to leave, please don't feel bad. Just get up and go on out. If you want to stay, we'll stick around, but I know other people have commitments. So I'm happy to stick around and continue to answer questions. But if you have to go, we appreciate you being here, but don't feel like you need to stay if you have other obligations. Sir.
Yes, sir. Hi, Michael Walker. We've been talking about ankle monitors, GPS, risk, and if. I'm sorry, folks. It's not if, it's when. He's going to figure out a way, one way or another. And I also think the state of California is targeting us because of our size of the community.
Yeah.
And we're up a creek without a paddle.
Yes. I hope we're all wrong, but I fear you're right. I'm going to turn over to Supervisor DiMattei real quick. He got some clarification from County Council on the park issue.
Thank you, Morgan. While you guys were asking these questions, I passed them on to our County Council, who is a really good land attorney and works on all of our stuff. One of the biggest things, the biggest hurdle is, to buy the land 4 to 6 months, negotiate a purchase price. If it's available for sale, we could work on it. But again, that would take 4 to 6 months, and it would come to the board, and we would have to, run that through. Then Stephanie asked a good question. If we could put easement on the property, we could, instead of a fee title, we get an easement across it. Sure, it would take the full board support to do that. Again, it could take up to a few months. I don't know if we have that, but there are some options without us having to buy the property. We would have to work with the landowner if he was willing and able to be able to do that. So those are the questions on trying to get a park. It would take 4 to 6 months. If we had the money, I'm sure we can negotiate something with the landowner, but that is from our County Council as of right now with just minor details and minor questions. Yes. That's a question for
We'd have to go back to the court and say, this is now a designated area that is prohibited, and it would be up to the court to, the court could say, absolutely, you're right, he needs to be moved. He could say, you formed the park after he was already placed there, so I'm not going to recognize that, much like that one appellate court case that decided the school, those things being, and clearly what the legislature is trying to do is to close abilities of communities to solve the problem afterward. It's no secret, that's the intent of the legislation, is to invalidate attempts of communities to stop the placement. So it would be up to ultimately the judge on how to interpret the statute that prohibits the parks in light of the information that the park was created after. And the judge would be free to use his discretion either way.
Okay, the non-legal answer is the Board of Supervisors stands ready to do whatever we need to do. If we need to lease it, accept a donation, we can act as quickly as possible to do that, to document it as a park. It may be a way out, I don't know, but we can at least try to do that. Because this is what I said earlier, our kids play in open spaces. That's why we live in rural communities. So we need to protect those spaces. Yeah, and Heather was saying the same thing to me. You can lease it, you can get an easement, you can put a bench out there. It's a park. So, yeah.
And according to Heather, we would also, she has just enlightened me that if you donated 1 acre right up against a piece of property, and we can obviously get that through within a board meeting or two. Again, does it look like we're doing this to get rid of them? Absolutely. But there are things we can talk to the landowner, reach out to us, and we will try to figure that out. If that throws up a hurdle, we're all about throwing up as many hurdles as we can to help these guys do what they do best. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. So I literally live right, where do I live, Ms. Brown? Right over here? It's right over here somewhere. And for decades, I know that the students have walked through our yard because we have the trail that goes right through our yard that the kids have walked through for generations. And it's really awesome. So what recourse do my wife, myself, my mother-in-law here, have if we find somebody on our property and with the kids coming, daily up and down throughout the school year, snow, no snow, the kids have always used that. What do we have? That path is used by them all the time.
Let me make sure I understand your question. Meaning, do we have some sort of exemption or prohibition from someone being close to that because there are children present there?
What I'm saying is that is legally, if we find somebody there, is it just a 911 call?
Oh,
is it, I want the kids to be able to continue doing it. I love it. I'm a teacher, and so for me, it makes me smile. But I said loads of, there's been a couple of them here tonight that I've seen, and we just, that person's not supposed to be at the store. He's not supposed to be down here at the community center. He's definitely not going to be on my property. And something like that happens with kids on mine and the neighboring property. What can we do as homeowners?
Yeah, you have the absolute right to allow anyone or no one to access your property, including Mr. Stevenson. So if you make it clear that he is not welcome, trespassing, the law of trespassing requires, there's a notice requirement that someone be informed that they're not allowed to be on that property, and a subsequent visit to that property is a criminal offense. I think in these circumstances, that's a 911 call. We need to know immediately any violation of the terms of his agreement. If he's simply outside of the bounds of his monitoring, that's a violation, and that's a reason to bring him in. And we. Certainly, it's your property. And if you want to put up a sign that says, Mr. Stevenson, no trespassing, well, you've sufficiently put him on notice. I mean, it is all about, under the interpretation of the statute, is this person on notice that he's not allowed to be there, and you have the right to kick anybody out or nobody out, or whoever you choose. So, yeah, I mean, that's a legitimate way to do it.
Hi, I'm Lynn Hershey. In this area, we have no mail delivery to the homes, which leaves only one place for him to get his mail. So I'm hoping that he will be supervised when he does that. And our mail people happen to all be female, and they're there all by themselves most of the time. So I'm concerned for our postmaster, and having been in that position myself, I understand being there alone and have had to call law enforcement myself before. So I just think that's something they should be considering when they're putting him into a community, because he has no other option to get his mail.
Absolutely. And sort of what I envision is sort of the strictest level of monitoring in the beginning. At some point, if they deem him to be successful and adapting well, they'll try or seek to reduce the level of supervision that he will be on. Eventually, he can graduate, so to speak, to unconditional release, where he is just trusted to be in the community. Whenever there will be a decrease in the level of supervision, I imagine we'll gather once again like this so that we can identify all of those places that we think are inappropriate for that level of supervision to be reduced. Post office, I don't think upon his release, you'll see him at the post office. If he goes there, he's supposed to be supervised at all times. If not, I would imagine, and once we dial in and argue about what the appropriate conditions of monitoring are, he's not going to be doing that. At the point that they determine he is sufficiently treated to be able to do that, we'll object, and we'll probably enlist the community once again to identify all those places. Because post office, there's a number of other things we're not thinking about until you're there and you think this would be really inappropriate for him to be here. And we can specifically list those out and put the court's feet to the fire on that.
Hey, my name is Mark. I've been here for probably about 12 years now. Quick question for you, and then possibly a question for the sheriff. So, if we get the homeowner back out of the deal, are we good? Because within 24 hours of finding out about this, the community, whether most people in the room know or not, we found out the homeowners, their address, their phone number, their address. They live in Truckee. They don't care if they poop on us. What can we legally do to put pressure on them?
Yeah, well, I mean, you are certainly free to reach out within the bounds of law. I can't encourage anybody to threaten them or do anything heavy-handed. I mean, I'm the DA, obviously. I can't tell you to do that. But it is ultimately the choice of the homeowner to volunteer and to accept compensation in exchange for this placement. Most of the placements that have fallen through, and I mean, over the course of my 27 years as a prosecutor handling these cases before, the majority of the ones that fell through were because the homeowner didn't appreciate the impact of the community and ultimately withdrew. So you're free to have any lawful contact with them. We are prohibited by law. That information is sealed for us to provide. It's not a secret. It's easy to find who owns property these days. But any lawful means to have a discussion with them to try and change their mind, I can't encourage you to do that, because remember, my intention is I have to participate in the process to secure housing. I can't just secretly go around and tell everybody, well, go just tell the homeowner to pull his head out and get with the program. But if you do that in a lawful way, it's up to them to say yes or no. But if the homeowner were to withdraw, if the property is not available, that placement is no longer available, and we're back to the drawing board. I'm going to clarify go at it. I'm going to soften that up a little bit, okay? I'm going to say you may lawfully reach out in any way you see fit to encourage the homeowner to change their mind on this, and provided you're not harassing, threatening, doxing, or doing things that would end up coming to my office, please, no. But you can try any lawful means to encourage them to change their mind. If they decide that it's not in their best interest to do it, then they're free to do that. So